Yeah.
A few people come in, but you can always jump in while we start, so I think we should make a start. It's already quite fast. So I'm your diversity and inclusion representative here in Cardiff, and as part of Black History Month, we wanted to bring a speaker to teach us about Black history. So today we're very lucky to have Abu-Bakr Madden with us. He's an education and training provider. He does training for life coaching, child development and mentoring. He's a visiting lecturer at Cardiff University, 9 years I believe, in the Life Learning Centre. So he's provided Black and African history courses at a degree level, education psychology and child development to the local community. So without further ado, the floor is yours, and we can make a start.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for everyone for turning up. We're here until approximately 1:30, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I'll try and keep within the remit of the time. Let me just introduce myself. My name is Abu-Bakr. Like the gentleman said, I worked for Cardiff University for approximately 9 years. This was a lifelong learning centre, and I run my own Black and African Studies program at the university that I taught at a degree level. And I'm also a visiting lecturer at the School of Social Sciences, where I train teachers how to deal with adult learners who suffer with things like dyslexia. Because what we're finding now, there's a lot of mature students coming into the university system, and many of them being diagnosed with dyslexia. And the other thing as well, which is taking place, is that most of these mature students are being taught by people who are twice their age younger. You know, and this is what you're seeing now, what's taking place with mature students, where younger people or younger teachers are teaching older people. And I try to bridge that gap so they can understand where the older generation are coming from. Right, thanks for coming. So this presentation is based upon Black History Month. Now, people may ask themselves, why is it important, to have Black History Month, and we have it once a year? One of the reasons is because unfortunately, during the 1600s, when the slave trade was well underway, because the slave trade really started around about the end of the 1400s with Spain and Portugal. This was at the time when the Moors, or the Africans, were kicked out of Spain. Many of them went back to North Africa. The rest were taken over to the Caribbean islands. Now, some of those Moors that were taken back to the Caribbean islands were known as Maroons. Okay, they were Spanish-speaking or Arabic-speaking individuals who were taken to the Caribbean islands, and this was during the time of Christopher Columbus. Okay, so the word Maroons comes from a Spanish word which basically means savage, barbarian, etc. Okay, it's a negative connotation what the word Maroons actually mean. So what we see a relationship between Andalusia or Islamic Spain with those people of North Africa and within the Caribbean islands. Okay, and what has taken place after that, since the 1400s, that Isabella and Ferdinand decided to really try to change history. And this is when world history really changes, where European nations started to gain hegemony over the Atlantic. Spain and Portugal were the first nations. Britain, France, Germany, Sweden, Denmark, those countries came in much later. And what they were doing, they were squabbling over new resources. Because in the 1300s, there was an African king by the name of Mansa Musa who brought so much gold with him in the 1300s, around about 1324, that he literally sunk the economy of North Africa and the Middle East. That's how much gold was coming out of North Africa. And it was at that moment where the European passion ignited for the type of resources that was in West Africa. And this is how they would ended up later on taking control over that region and then using the people from that particular country to come in and to develop the so-called New World. So you see there's a relationship. When Britain actually comes into the slave trade, which is during the Elizabethan period, around about 1555, the first people which really gets involved in the plantation work are not so much the so-called Negroes. Okay, the first people who were enslaved in the Caribbean islands, such as Jamaica and St. Kitts, were Irish. So if you go back to the time of Oliver Cromwell, when they took over Northern Ireland, basically, they were the first slaves. And I'm a descendant from those first Irish settlers that fought in the, around about the time, just after the English Civil War, yeah? And they were actually sent over there as prisoners of war to work the plantations in Jamaica. And a lot of people don't know that. And this is where you find that a lot of us African Caribbeans have got Irish names or Scottish names, but majority of the population of whites that went to the Caribbean islands, yeah, were Irish. So we have to see that link. So why is it important? Well, during this particular period, what you start to find is that Europeans started to rewrite history, okay, and rewrite our contribution, achievements, and accomplishments out of the world records. And they started to instill other notions and narratives towards us. Now, some European people, or some people within this country, would say, well, look, why do we need black history? Well, the important thing is that every person should know what their history is. Because what history does, it makes you feel good about yourself, it makes you feel good about your past, yeah, and it instills within us confidence and self-esteem. This is why history is important. Just like it's important to the British, history is important to other people. And one of the things that I've tried to push within the educational system is multicultural education. And I believe that everyone's history should be spoken about within the curriculum. Okay? Not just in the history lessons and geography lessons. It should be acknowledged in physics, chemistry, biology, because different peoples from the past, whether they're African or non-Africans, have contributed immensely to these subjects and disciplines. Okay? This is an image here of Sofia. She was the king. She was the wife of King George III. Now, King George III was the one which fought in the American Revolution, okay, against the Americans. She was the wife. She was mulatto. You can see from her features, yeah, that she's from Moorish backgrounds. So the majority of the Moors migrated to the north. So when Isabella and Ferdinand had taken over Andalusia at this particular time, a lot of Africans moved to the north, especially places like Germany and Austria. You have a large Moorish presence within these regions, okay? She is actually the grandmother, yeah, of Queen Victoria. So what you actually see, you've got African blood running in the royal family veins, okay? And there's a lot of proof to substantiate this. So what I'm trying to emphasize here is the importance of miscegenation. Different racial groups coming together, amalgamating and producing children, yeah, from these type of units or unions. So when we look at black people, the reason why I show this, we wasn't just in the lower stratas of British society. We were also in the amongst the aristocracy as well. So this is how you have to see things. Orlando Patterson is a Jamaican sociologist. And one of the things that he says is that when African history or black history is taught, it's usually taught through three approaches, methods, or mediums. So there's a catastrophic view, which maintains that black history in the New World is a long list of disasters and horrors caused by white depression. Okay? Unfortunately, if you look at some of the history programs, such as on the Discovery Channel, National Geographic, whenever they look at blacks and Africans, they always look at them in a negative aspect. They never look at the contributionism approach, okay, which looks at the type of contribution, achievements, and the accomplishments that black or African peoples made in world history and culture. And one of the examples I give there is looking at ancient Egypt, which was known as Kemet. Kemet actually means black. It comes from a Hamitic word, which means chem. Yeah? This is where we get the word chemistry or chemistry, which means the black arts and sciences. When the Arabs moved in, they came in with a thing, put an al in front, where we got alchemy. So we know that African people were involved in some of the highest sciences in antiquity. But unfortunately, through the 14th, 15th, 16th century, a lot of the information was being distorted or falsified in order to write them out of history. And then we have the survivalist approach. And these approaches I'm going to focus on and look at through my presentation. Okay? And that's looking at the adversities and hostilities that we went through, yeah, by owners, slave owners and colonizers. Okay? So it's looking at the Middle Passage, because the reason why I'm here as an African or as African Caribbean, because I'm Jamaican, is because that one or both, yeah, of my ancestors that were transported from West Africa to the so-called New World survived that journey. That's the only reason why I'm here. There was many people who didn't survive this journey. Those journeys on the Atlantic Ocean would have lasted approximately, yeah, between 3 to 6 months. This is what needs to be understood. There were no steamships in those days. There was no machinery. They had to rely on the wind. Yeah? So for 3 to 6 months, when you've got Africans in the Middle Passage, yeah, chained up, etc., they are eating, defecating, urinating, vomiting, and bleeding over one another. Okay? This is what we have to try to understand about this reality. Okay, many of them, and what they actually found from a lot of the research, when they looked at a lot of these African women which came to the Caribbean islands, that it took about 3 to 4 years. Because of the traumatic experiences within the Middle Passage, it took approximately 3 to 4 years before they can actually conceive children. Yeah? This is what you have to understand about the understanding of the biology and trauma with these type of experiences that took place back in old times. Why is Black history important? Now let's look at the quotation of David Hume. David Hume is known as the father of the Enlightenment, English Enlightenment. He was Scottish. This is what he says. There never was a civilized nation of any other complexion than white, nor even an individual eminent either in action or speculation, no ingenious manufacturing, etc. So he's talking about arts and sciences only came from European or white people. So when he's looking at Mesopotamia, the ancient Sumerians, Babylonians, Chaldeans, and all these particular groups, what he's trying to say that they were white. The whole mixed civilization, North America, obviously they must have been white. Ancient Kemet, ancient Kush, on the East African coast of the Nile Valley, they had to have been white. So this is what he's basically saying. So this is what we need to understand why Black history is important in order to put things into perspective. We're not saying as Black people or as people of African descent that Europeans did not make their contribution, because they did. When we look at the Greco-Roman civilizations or empires, but who did they learn from? Okay, this is what's really important. Yeah, majority of the philosophers, the Greek philosophers that we talk about, yeah, many of them are educated in Africa, and the African scientists, doctors, etc. And this one needs to be realized and recognized. Yeah, so there was contact for hundreds of years between the Greeks and between the ancient Kemites or Egyptians for these Greeks to come over and to bring so-called civilization to Europe. And then the Romans later taking over, borrowing that, those cultural elements, and making their contribution by way of expansion. So what we have to understand from this quotation, this is falsification, this is a lie, okay? Then we hear the similar thing was approximately 150 years later from Arnold Toynbee, who's supposed to be one of the leading historians of the 20th century, when he said the black race has not helped to create any civilization whatsoever. So these are the sort of notions that is taking place amongst European or British academicians, okay? And these ideas are then going to be filtered down to the common people. And this is the reason why Black or African history is vitally important. Unfortunately, we only get 1 month, 4 weeks a year to really explain all this. And then we go back to normal things or normality. If you look at Anglo-American and British history, is taught every day in one way or another, whether it's through the newspapers, whatever type of medium you can think about. Even if you look at most of the programs and documentaries. So people are exposed in this country to their history on a daily basis. Sometimes they're unconscious about this reality. Yeah? When you're bombarded with something on a daily basis, you may take it for granted. You may not even realize the impact and effect it actually has. So when people from other backgrounds come in now, instantly they're going to feel alienated because they don't see themselves as being part of that experience. And this is what this is about. This is actually showing not just the contribution and the achievement, the accomplishment that Black and African peoples made, but unified with Europeans as well. Because when we look at culture and civilization, we have to look at all those people that contribute to that society. Okay? So we have to sometimes omit race from there and look at the people that come to those particular societies in order to bring about those contributions. Then we look at the likes of Charles Montesquieu, another individual of the Enlightenment, because the Enlightenment period begins around about 1750. He was a person that came up with the concept, of civilized, savage, and barbarian. This is in the 1700s. And later on, these perceptions and concepts will then be labeled during the colonial period, especially in Africa. Colonization in Africa has really started around about 1884 to 1885 at the Berlin Conference. Not really before that. Okay? And this is why if you look at the map of Africa, you will notice all these straight lines. This is where 11 European nations who did not invite no African to talk about their country.